Creating a shade garden with low-light plants is a great way to add greenery and interest to areas of your yard or landscape that receive limited sunlight. Here's how to create a shade garden with low-light plants. Assess your site. Evaluate the shade conditions in your garden to determine the type and intensity of shade present. Shade can vary from dappled or partial shade, filtered sunlight, to full shade, no direct sunlight. Observe how sunlight moves across the garden throughout the day and identify areas with consistent shade or changing light levels. Choose shade-tolerant plants. Select plants that are well suited to low-light conditions and can thrive in shade. Look for shade-tolerant species and cultivars of trees, shrubs, perennials, ferns, and ground covers that are adapted to growing in shaded environments. Consider factors such as plant size, growth habits, foliage color, texture, and seasonal interest when choosing plants for your shade garden. Consider foliage texture and color. Incorporate a variety of foliage textures, shapes, and colors to add visual interest and dimension to your shade garden. Choose plants with bold, variegated, or colorful foliage to brighten shady areas and create contrast against darker backgrounds. Mix and match plants with different leaf sizes, textures, and patterns to create a dynamic and appealing garden composition. Create layers and depth. Arrange plants in layers or tiers to maximize space and create depth in your shade garden. Plant taller trees and shrubs as a backdrop or focal point, mid-sized perennials and ferns as fillers or accents, and low-growing ground covers or creeping plants as a ground layer. Use planters, raised beds, or hanging baskets to add vertical interest and create visual layers within the garden. Provide contrast and balance. Create contrast and balance in your shade garden by combining plants with different heights, shapes, and textures. Pair bold, architectural plants with fine textured or delicate species to create visual interest and balance in the garden. Use foliage color, variegation, and seasonal changes to create focal points and highlight key features within the garden. Choose shade-loving flowers. Select flowering plants that can bloom in low-light conditions to add color and vibrancy to your shade garden. Choose shade-loving perennials, annuals, and bulbs that are adapted to growing in shade or partial shade. Consider shade-tolerant species such as hostas, astilbes, impatiens, begonias, bleeding hearts, columbines, and foxgloves for seasonal color and interest. Provide adequate water and mulch. Ensure that plants in your shade garden receive adequate water, especially during hot, dry weather or periods of drought. Water plants deeply and regularly to keep the soil evenly moist but not waterlogged. Apply a layer of organic mulch, such as shredded bark, compost, or leaf litter, around plants to conserve moisture, suppress weeds, and regulate soil temperature in shady areas. Maintain and prune regularly. Maintain your shade garden by performing regular maintenance tasks such as watering, weeding, and pruning. Remove dead or yellowing foliage, spent flowers, and debris to keep the garden tidy and promote healthy growth. Prune trees and shrubs as needed to maintain shape, size, and air circulation within the garden. Experiment and adapt. Experiment with different plant combinations, arrangements, and garden designs to find what works best for your specific shade conditions and aesthetic preferences. Be willing to adapt and adjust your shade garden over time as plants grow and mature, and as your gardening skills and tastes evolve. By following these tips and incorporating shade-tolerant plants into your garden design, you can create a lush and inviting shade garden that thrives in low-light conditions and provides beauty and enjoyment throughout the seasons.